Thank you. Shrimati Malvika Rai, Chairperson of the Indian Institute of Law and Management. Qureshi Sahab, the Chairman Emeritus of the IILM. The Chief Operating Officer, Manika Raikwar. Thanks for your very generous introduction. Shri Harivansh Chaturvedi, Director General of IILM. Members of the IILM family, distinguished faculty, dear students, ladies and gentlemen. Though I also recognize the presence of very many eminent people here, those who have served this country for long as policy makers, civil servants. I'm very happy to be here today. This is a special occasion. The 100th birth anniversary of late Shri Kulwant Rai ji. I had the honor of having known him as a very young parliamentarian decades ago. His humility, his generosity, both as a host and as a human being, had left an indelible imprint on my mind. Kulwant Rai ji, as was mentioned, established many institutions and made a notable contribution. And that contribution is here before us in this campus and the other campuses which IILM has in Noida, in Gurgaon, in Lucknow, and wherever. An institution which has its own standing, and it has educated and empowered thousands of sons and daughters of our country who have stepped out of the campuses and are now engaging with life in different vocations and spheres. But to have graduated in commerce, that's what I noticed from Lahore, Kulwant Rai ji in 1946, just a year before India's independence, and to have the vision to take the plunge and establish multiple businesses across various sectors, leaving behind a rich legacy. And beyond the commercial establishment, his commitment to serve humanity, his connection with our art and culture, and also connecting with spirituality and with Satya Sai Foundation, working there very actively. At the same time, in that era, to think of working and establishing and to become a president of the Indo-American Chamber of Commerce, and again to establish the Sanatan Sangeet Sanskriti in 1993. That goes on to give only one message, that he was truly a multifaceted person, not confined to one sphere, but was thinking well beyond the original area of interest that was the business. And it was not for nothing that the University of Bradford had conferred a doctorate on Kulwant Rai ji for his contribution in the field of business, education, and philanthropy. So I'm sure that you'll all join me in paying our tributes to a visionary, a leader, and a philanthropist. I'm very happy, therefore, to have been invited for this, and I thank you all for giving me the opportunity to talk about my views on a subject which is of interest to all of us. The theme that was chosen, Anilji was talking to me about it, the Indian economy and the opportunities and the challenges. It's both interesting and of contemporary relevance, not only to India but to the world. Today's India is different from the one in which I and many of us of my generation were born in. But today's India is also not disconnected from the foundational values and the rich legacy that we have inherited. Many of us who were born after independence have been fortunate to see that, to remain connected. I've always said that change is constant, whether in human life or in the journey of nations and societies. But in case of India, there is a continuity which is distinct. Why I say so? Because for a civilization to have that continuity, from where you were, the thoughts, the values, since millennia, is truly a remarkable thing. India is an ancient civilization. We are rich in our diversity. We are multi-religious, multilingual, multi-ethnic country, where the Constitution recognizes 22 languages, and nobody knows how many dialects. Some say in thousands. The 1,600 dialects were officially recognized long back in the country. The diversity in people's habits, cuisine, music, culture, that diversity is the richness of India which makes the world wonder. We are the original melting pot of civilizations and cultures. I had said so in an address in New York at the Asia Society in 2006 as India's minister. And when we see our country, that truly what it is, that gives us a lot of strength and global respect. Coexisting. Who all? Three major ethnic groups of Aryans, Dravidians, and Mongoloids. 7 major religions of the world. India has always given a message of coexistence, mutual respect, compassion. That has remained integral to our philosophy and to our thinking. Irrespective of where we were, decades back, India was recognized. Even before we became a free nation, when the leaders of this country stood up and spoke. To my mind, there was hardly any decade or the century before the century in which I was born. In each decade, there were Indians, philosophers, poets, scientists, scholars, every decade who had made a mark and they were noticed in the world. I'm aware that I'm speaking today to people who are knowledgeable, maybe more than me on many subjects, but also to young minds, the students, the sons and daughters of India, who are the principal stakeholders in the future of this country, an aspirational India. And you all, young people, are witness to and scripting new essays in India's and development that are being written every year and will continue to be well beyond our lifetime. I feel that it's important to recall and reconnect with our history. That's why I'm referring to that, though coming to economy later. And the distance that India has traveled, we together as Indians, as free people, living in a democratic, sovereign republic, the largest democracy in the world, with enshrined fundamental rights for the citizens, which are secure, which are justiciable, can be defended. That is the biggest strength for a nation which came out of centuries of colonization and subjugation. When we came out of it on 15th of August 1947, it was not easy. It's easy to express these few words today. The centuries of subjugation, of colonization, of exploitation. When we had no right, our ancestors, on our resources, they had no voice. People would have said, like Lord Macaulay and others, that they're very strong words which were used by the colonizing power in the House of Commons. I don't want to go into details. Professors and academics here are aware of that. We had the richness of thought. We were a rich country which was rendered poor because of plunder. Come to think of this, that we became independent despite fighting an empire. It was a courageous struggle in which tens of thousands, maybe lakhs, of our ancestors died, went to prisons, went to gallows. It's not a small thing. And that struggle, led by none other than the father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, must always give us the inspiration that come what may, we shall overcome, irrespective of the challenges that we may face. We could do it then. The poor, who were considered helpless, illiterate, if they could do that, bringing the mightiest of empire on its knees, then this country and the people can achieve anything. I have no doubt in my mind, never had. The India of 1947, I'm referring to, had a population of 370 million. Mostly poor, 80% illiterate. We had 20 universities in India and 500 colleges. 7 decades later, we have 1.4 billion. We have 1,100 universities. We have 50,000 colleges in India, almost 78% literacy. We are the 5th largest economy of the world. We are a nuclear power. We are a space power. We launch our own satellites. We have our own space vehicles. We launch the satellites of other countries, even other universities, in geostationary orbits. The first time we did it, launching 10 satellites together, was in the year 2007, if my memory serves me right. And I was traveling abroad. I felt very proud when the world was announcing it, that India has achieved the first. We were the first country to achieve that. After that, this journey has continued. We have achieved much more. And not only that, we are leader in many fields today. I would say, if we are billion plus, we are also a land of billion opportunities. But this India has been built assiduously with a national resolve and vision. which we must never forget. I was born few years after independence. Many of those of my generation arrived around the same time, few years before, few years later. And I personally, and those of my generation, have been witness to India's story and India's transformation. Each decade, we registered and saw establishment of institutions of national importance and the launch of mega projects. We were overawed as children to learn about the concept, the scale of the Indian Institutes of Management, Indian Institutes of Technology, the IITs and the IIMs scripted India's stories in the 50s and the 60s. We set up a National Institute of Science, National Institute of Design, National Institute of Nuclear Science, National Institute of Space Science. My dear friends, that all happened when I was still a toddler or in primary school. It had all happened. We were a poor country. These institutions of excellence empowered the sons and daughters of India and prepared them for the future. Today, it looks a routine thing. But to have the vision to establish industrial cities of Bokaro, Bhilai, Rourkela, Jamshedpur, and many more. We heard the names of major dams and hydroelectric projects that came up. I come from Himachal. And when I used to go to school, our teacher used to tell us about the big Bhakra Nangal project, the Bhakra Dam that was coming up, and the Gobind Sagar. That happened in the 50s. It's not only that one dam, the list is a very long one, including the Narmada one, which Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who had the vision as the first Prime Minister to call all these IITs to IIMs to all these mega projects as the temples of modern India. But we heard of Sardar Sarovar, Tungabhadra, and then the Pokhran. I was still a student, the Pokhran 1. The nuclear blast, the atomic tests. And the world took notice. We had to do it to make a statement because we had taken a conscious decision as a country not to join the NPT. That many of you should know why we did so, though we were a country which believed in peace, because our northern neighbor, where we just had the disengagement with China, they had gone nuclear. And the same India's leader and Prime Minister told the world, we believe in disarmament, but we retain the right to go nuclear to defend our sovereignty and our integrity. And we did not sign the NPT. There was an echo, that's why I put it down, but okay. That's okay. So I have to tell you that this happened in 1974. And we had to fight a long battle, face sanctions. Manika referred to that. Today's lecture is not about it. It's another story and a long story of those complex negotiations to get out of those sanctions, to be accepted in the nuclear mainstream of the world after decades and decades. That was one of the great, big learning experiences for me and our other colleagues. We are talking about satellites. The Aryabhat was launched in 1975. Why I'm referring to that? Because most of you were born after the major transformation of India, which I'll come to now, dealing with economics. And that's where the world took notice that this country cannot be put down. We are living in a world where perpetual conflicts and unresolved issues remain globally. How many of us remember after two major wars, the invasion by China, invasion by Pakistan in 1965, severe drought and famine in India, and what happened in eastern Pakistan, the genocide, the pillage, plunder, rape. India, which is already struggling to come out of multiple pressures, had 1 crore 10 million refugees here. We had the 7th Fleet, nuclear fleet of America in the Bay of Bengal. The British fleet had sailed, they all were supporting our opponent. Chinese army came to our borders. India fought the war. India liberated Bangladesh. Pakistan's army surrendered. Biggest military victory for any country since the Second World War, when General Niazi surrendered before Lieutenant General J.S. Arora. Those are proud moments of this country. Why I'm saying so? That this all must be recalled and retold so that our future, the sons and daughters, take pride. It's important for national pride and to respect those who worked, struggled, and those soldiers who were martyred in thousands for the cause of humanity in fighting for Bangladesh liberation. Today's India has a different profile and a unique profile. When we talk of the world, we are a factor of stability, the largest democracy and a vibrant democracy and maybe quite a noisy democracy, but that's what we are. As you can see these days, will remain so. But we are also an emerging economic and technological power, and we are set to play a larger role in the world affairs. Let me just, in few lines, as I move to the base theme, refer to the 80s and the 90s, when the world witnessed cataclysmic changes. The fall of Berlin Wall, the reunification of Germany, the collapse of Soviet Union, when it was written the end of history, am I right? And a unipolar world, which some of us said then is transient and temporary. The world is too diverse to remain unipolar. But unipolarity came for a short time, maybe for a decade. So we have witnessed that transformation in our lifetime. But today's India, how the foundations were laid. The same 80s and 90s, the world was witnessing other revolutions of information technology and communication. 1991 was a watershed year for India. Only day before I was reading in some of the obituaries which were written and editorials for one of the great thinkers and economists of our country, Vivek Debroy, of the 1991 reforms. When India's finance minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, who later became our prime minister for 10 years, unveiled an economic reforms agenda that was bold. India's economy opened up. As we embarked on the path of economic liberalization to engage with the world as a self-assured and confident nation, Indian corporates also stepped out, went across the shores of India, and became globally competitive. Did it happen by accident or chance? The answer is no. India was prepared. India was ready. As I said, that there is a reason why I'm referring to few things. Over the decades, our sons and daughters were empowered by these institutions of excellence, of higher learning, in science and technology. This also coincided with a big leap that our country made by embracing the IT and communication revolution. We were left out of the first, second, and third industrial revolutions. We had to cover a big gap. But we leaped. We bridged the digital divide and emerged as a global leader in information technology, with over 50% share today in the IT-enabled services of the world. And along with, when you look at the BPOs, you know what India is known as, and I learned for the first time when I went to Ireland as a minister, the office of the world. So known as the office of the world. Tens of thousands of our sons and daughters, they work, night shifts, day shifts, and they're connected to the world. It's not a small achievement. Before the students sitting here were born, we had the big millennium bug. World was scared what will happen to the supercomputers, everything will crash by the turn of the century. And everywhere Indians were called, including countries which did not speak English language. Our experts were called. That was an achievement of this country. Another area where we are leaders is the generic medicines. They triggered ethical debates in the world, particularly when it came to treatment for HIV/AIDS. You know, the cost, doctors are sitting here, of treatment for one patient, the minimal cost was $15,000 per annum. What India did, the arrival of the Indian generics. This was a debate which went right up to the United Nations and we won. It was South Africa which fought that battle. And I remember Nkosazana Zuma was the health minister. And when that happened, the world recognized today 70% of the patients in poor countries get their life-saving medicines at affordable prices from India. And we earned the acronym of the Pharmacy of the Poor. So Office of the World and Pharmacy of the Poor. These are the strengths. We are an emerging leader in startup, in digital field. We today command respect and admiration of the world as a valuable partner. We are globally connected, having access to the information flows through internet, television. But interesting thing, people living in remote villages were poor. Today you see even not in mega cities, the hawkers and others having a cell phone and you pay digital payments. I find it difficult. People do it. Youngsters do it very happily. And our farmers, housewives use internet to check on weather, sowing, to sell milk, other produce. We have 1.1 billion mobile phone users. And that's why I say a few decades ago, this was unthinkable. And India is not a land of 1.4 billion people, but 1 billion opportunities also. There are many fields in which we are emerging leader, acknowledged. Space and biotechnology. Our corporates I refer to, I have ventured out. They made major investments in Africa, in Latin America, and in Europe. Also acquisitions in key sectors of infrastructure, steel, shipbuilding, pharmaceuticals and others. None of us could have imagined, at least when we were studying, that chorus, tetle, Land Rover, Jaguars would be acquired and will become from international brands to India's or India owned. This is where India reached. We have a GDP of $3.95 trillion today. We are the fifth largest, as I referred to. But though number 5 in ranking, now some sobering thought. Our share in the world is less than 4%. In 1700, before the arrival of the British, we were 24% of world's GDP. China and India together, 53%. Our per capita income, which is worrisome, is still one of the lowest compared to the emerging middle and major economies. Yes, we have overtaken UK. I'm very proud that we are number 5, but we should be careful. There's a little bit of realism some of our policy planners do need. UK's population is 65 million. UP's population is 250 million. Our per capita income is $2,500. UK's per capita is $51,000. So when we have to make policies, we have to factor in. Then only we can set up targets and priorities. We also need to reflect on our strengths, challenges, and vulnerabilities. To my mind, job creation, manufacturing, trade, inequality, and hunger must receive priority national attention if this country has to realize its dreams and fulfill the aspirations of the younger generation. Another area of concern, we are the fastest growing economy, but the falling FDI. I was listening very carefully to our finance minister, and she made a very honest and candid statement in Washington that she's perplexed, so am I. That actually we are the fastest growing economy, nobody can contest this. And we must continue to be. But why the FDI is falling? Is it our fault? I will not say it's our fault. It's because of the cross currents, as we know what's happening. But equally, what is our concern is the fall in demand and consumption. There are no supply side issues with India. It's the spending power, stagnant wages. That is a cause of concern. And recently, the outflow of money, FII and FPI. Whatever happening in the world, we cannot remain untouched because we live in a world which is interconnected. But a lot of money has gone out, 86,000 crores in October, 7.5% fall in our stock market. Worrisome. Our core sector of industry, the output accounts for 40% of the industrial production. As per the government figures, and government is expressing concern, and I must say that RBI also is very much on board on that. It's fallen to a 10-month low. This is deepening growth anxieties. There are headwinds. And signs of slowdown. I would say, with all humility, time has come for us to think of out-of-box solutions to fix this urgently and create new pathways of development. But connected with that is the manufacturing. You know, India's share of manufacturing is low. In 2012, it was stagnating at 16%. And that was the time, mindful of the constraints of time, when we took the initiative to launch the National Manufacturing Policy. I'll take a minute to tell the youth why what was the motivation. As your minister, I was abroad, as minister in charge of India's economy. There were news reports that for 100 vacancies to be filled in the ITBP, interviews were called in Bareilly, in UP. 100,000 traveled. Interviews were cancelled. 98 died traveling on the roofs of the trains. The former secretaries were sitting here, and I benefited always from their guidance and advice and their knowledge. Upon my return, the first thing was to call a meeting and to question why independent India is without a national manufacturing policy. We consulted the stakeholders across the country. It came up with a policy with the clear objective to raise the share of manufacturing in India's GDP from 16% to 25% of GDP in 10 years and create 100 million jobs. That's 10 crore. And what was the principal instrument we chose? Two. A, the National Investment and Manufacturing Zones. 18 were notified. I can reel off without looking at anything. The largest one is Dholera in Gujarat. The second was 904 square kilometer. The second one is Manesar Bawal. Third one is Pithampur Dharmao, 323 square kilometer. I won't bore you with that, but I can go to the smallest, which is near Nagpur at Kuhi-Umre Taluka, which is 54 square kilometer. These are all notified industrial cities of India with effective single window approvals, because the red tape, red color is good. Our women wear it and the red tilak and everything, but when the files move in the government with the red tape, it becomes a pain. And that is where we wanted to get rid of that, but also the industrial corridors. Delhi-Mumbai Industrial Corridor, Chennai, Bengaluru, which we extended to Chitradurga, first to Tumkur, then to Chitradurga. Launched also the Amritsar-Kolkata. We were negotiating. I do not know what is the status now. Maybe I'll ask Rajiv Kher and others later of what we were working on, and we were almost there. That was the spine, as we used to call it. That's the Mumbai-Bengaluru Economic Corridor. And Japan as a major partner is the biggest development partner of this country. And we moved forward. But we took certain hits, because MSME sector matters a lot to us. It's not only the big industries. 36% of India's industrial production and 45% of exports come out of the MSMEs. And the two hits I refer to, sometimes you don't know what will happen. There are natural disasters, there are floods, there are cyclones. But the two hits were, unfortunately, 2016, 8th November, demonetization, and the COVID pandemic. It took a huge toll on India's GDP, India's MSME sector, India's job creation. Millions of jobs were lost. 90% of India's workforce is employed in unorganized sector. They suffered. Now we have to take the stock of the present. I am concerned. From 16% I was referring to, the share of manufacturing today, as I'm speaking to you, is 14%. We have gone down 2%. And we have a global share of 2.9%. There again, we are number 5, fortunately, as I referred to in the economy. But look at China's share is 31.6%. China is number 1 manufacturing power, twice the share of America. Exactly. This has to change. We must change it. We must have a national actionable plan and work on it together. Because the services sector, which provide employment to over 30%, also have its limits. It will grow only on the back of the strength of the industrial manufacturing and production. If that does not happen, we can't take it forward. Yes, I refer that we are an ancient civilization, you all know and I know. But we are a young and aspirational country with a median age of 29. We have rich human resources, good minds. The demographic profile and this is an asset. 2/3 of our 1.4 billion people are young. So India has the benefit of demographic dividend. But we can reap it only if we create 15 million jobs annually. The skilling and reskilling of our youth is required with new technologies coming in the world. Presently, only 4%, less than 5% of our workforce is skilled formally. Another 30% is semi-skilled. And more than 65% is unskilled. Now coming on jobs, when you look at the young job seekers, I don't want to paint a dismal picture, but those who have been policy makers must identify the challenges and prioritize how to address that. Young job seekers are making up today 49% of the unemployed. Large number of our educated people are either unemployed or underemployed. So what I refer to as the demographic dividend, if we do not create jobs, it will be social instability, which will undermine our growth. And failure to create jobs, repeating myself what I said then in Davos, that if we do not do it, India cannot afford to do that, because that will become a demographic whirlwind. So we have the strength, we have the asset, how to reap the benefit. That must remain the only focus for this country. Trade is another important factor. We cannot reach where we want unless and until we address the challenge. Our share in global trade is very low. In merchandise trade, it's $437 billion as of 2023, with a share of 1.8% in the world trade of $24 trillion US. In trade in services, we are better, share of 4.3% with $337 billion. But we cannot, because I don't want to be reminded, but I have to, that again the northern neighbor is at number one, even in trade in the world. We live in a world which is interconnected, interdependent, linked by technology, economic partnerships. I feel, this is my view and shared by many, we cannot shut our doors and windows. We have to engage with the world as a self-assured country. Though people will always debate. When there was the global financial and economic crisis, banking crisis, 2008-9, we stepped out and engaged with the world. Our wisdom was questioned. Some of you may recall. I had to struggle within the cabinet to get the mandate, but we finally got it. And we stitched major agreements with Japan, with South Korea, with ASEAN. Started the negotiations with Australia, New Zealand. Finished with Malaysia, Indonesia. Started with EU. And the decisions were proven right. Because in 4 years, our exports doubled. From 152 billion US dollars, we finished at 323 billion. Today, we are 437. We must accelerate. We cannot afford to live on this small share. So in my view, rethink on PPAs and CPAs. There's the investment agreements with partner countries and with comprehensive economic partnership agreements. That rethink and review is sending a negative signal to the world. I will be talking to the best of my ability to those who will listen to me. Do not do it. India's decision to withdraw from RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, actually disheartened me personally, but also as an Indian. It took us 20 years to reach there. China was blocking us every step. We could get into a partnership or a country which was attending the ASEAN +3 summits. India, New Zealand, and Australia were out. We pushed for ASEAN +6. That is what led to the RCEP. If we want to be a global power, we have to engage with the world. We have to be confident. Asia-Pacific region is critical for us. It proved during the Second World War. It proved after the Second World War. It's proving again. We cannot be a global power engaging with a truncated globe. We must not be worried. I know the arguments given sometimes that, we have more imports from X. I'm not talking of China, even of ASEAN. Well, I have one message. No country imports what it does not need, and no country can export what it does not produce. That's all. But we must become a part of global production chains and global supply chains to achieve where we want to be. This last point which I want to mention is my concern on rising inequality. There's a yawning gap. It's unsustainable. It's the highest since the British rule today. 1%, 40% of national wealth. Top 10% have 76% of India's wealth. The bottom 50% have less than 7%. I am one who celebrates the creators of wealth. Wealth has to be created, must be created. Historically, it has proven, but once it is created, the wise reinvest, redistribute, expand for common good. That's what we should see happening in India too. India needs to invest more in agriculture, education, and health. I won't expand with the numbers, but what we are spending is very low on education. We cannot afford. National total is 3%, center is spending 0.38%. To meet the targets of national education policy, we need 6% of our GDP. As a fastest growing economy, we are a major food producer of the world. Largest fruit and vegetable producer of the world, largest milk producer of the world. And China and India are number 1 and 2 in food producing. We are major exporter. And why we are number 1 and 2? Because 1.4 billion, no country can produce to feed India or China. We have to produce that food. But the recent report of Global Hunger Index puts us at 105. 200 million Indians undernourished. That's 1/7 of India's population. 1/7. Now, not that we don't have food. Yes, we have. The farmers are producing. Granaries are full. It's systemic default, systemic failure. Nothing about the country, which must get fixed urgently. Because we cannot afford that we produce this much, we have so much of buffer stocks, but that distribution thing, the leaks which are there, everybody is trying. I'm not saying efforts are not being made and will continue to be made. This country will continue to register high economic growths. But there are medium-term risks, which I will briefly mention. The military conflicts in the world, Russia-Ukraine war, the Israel war on Gaza, Lebanon, escalation of tension between Israel and Iran, genuine anxiety and fears. This even our foreign minister recently has said repeatedly about the expansion of the conflict, the regional conflict. That has hurt the global economy and trade. That has disrupted the supply chains. That has pushed up the commodity prices and the oil prices. So these are the unknown factors which can pull any country back, because in an interconnected world, anything happening in one part, say in Sahara, in Africa, there is this major conflict or Ukraine, some people will say, how does it concern us? No country in the world, irrespective of rich or poor, big or small, living in any continent can be unaffected by such conflicts in the interdependent, interconnected world. Let's not forget 2008 and 9, the global banking and financial crisis. Let's not forget the COVID pandemic. Anything happening in one part of the world hurts everyone, and the risks are very high. So we cannot afford more flight of capital. Some things we can handle, some things are beyond us. We have a laudable national objective of becoming a developed country, and this is the last point I wanted to say, by 2047. I'll not be alive then, even if I wish to live that long, but I surely won't be. But I want my country to reach there. For that, the target is $30 trillion GDP. So everybody is happy, it's good. If you ask me, is it doable? Yes. But how? To achieve this, we need uninterrupted annual GDP growth of 10% from this year onwards until 2047. 7% is high, we are the fastest growing. But we can't reach 30 trillion. Anybody can calculate. I was not a great student in mathematics, but numbers I know. Now, one thing which we should do besides the action plan is a national consensus between the center and the states. I was talking to one of our very knowledgeable former secretaries, DK, and is right that the states which are lagging behind, states like UP, Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Orissa, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, they have huge strengths in agriculture. And if there's a partnership, if there's a national consensus, investment made there, we can really turn it around and achieve our national objectives. So ladies and gentlemen, and our sons and daughters, India is a land of ideas and opportunities. Our entrepreneurs, our business leaders, our scientists, our educationists, our startup leaders have attracted global admiration and respect. I am an eternal optimist. I'll remain so in the journey of this country. We live in a multipolar world. In this century, the countries of the global south, and I'll be speaking on that a few weeks later abroad, will play a critical role, will have a defining influence, and India will remain a central pillar of the global south. That's where my optimism flows from. I would like to thank you again. Maybe I overshot the time, I didn't look. Thank you very much, and all the best.